there's a linear drive that we want as you're moving into the ring. There's a linear drive with that right leg, with the energy kind of going linearly up at the right-hand side. And then at that point, once it's here, we turn it into the center to get it to the 270 position. At the same time, we're pulling our left foot off the ground. Does that kind of answer your question?
So with the shot put yesterday, she was talking about like doing a butt kick towards the front. Is that like lower meniscus?
So I'll kind of get into that a little bit more in mine with how Luke taught me to do it. I remember in high school, it wasn't so much emphasis on the butt kick aspect, more of just kind of that, don't let it, one, leg behind, and don't let it lead. Just kind of keep it neutral behind the right side. But we didn't really have so much emphasis on getting like the heel to butt, get it high over the right leg.
Yeah, she did a lot of that naturally, correctly, and we loved it. And the discus is trailing behind it. Let's see here. Next, the power position. What we like to see in the power position when the left foot, or what we're looking for then, when the left foot touches down, ideally, when the left foot touches down, we want the discus high and behind. But again, as I mentioned, Maggie's a little bit over-rotated at this point in her career, so when her left foot touches down, the discus is already down over here. So we want the discus at the high point. It's not there. We always stressed to keep her right foot moving no matter what. We don't like to see anything stop in the ring, because that just bleeds off energy, it's inefficient, it has to hitch in the middle of the throw. So that right foot always has to keep turning through the release. And at this point, we kind of like to see the left arm longer. Then the last position is the moment when the discus comes out of the hand. What we say all the time is we want the hips to be in front of the chest and the chest in front of the chin at release. See, Maggie's got this a little bit backwards. I remember back then, what was her name? From Kay Mooney, yeah. Okay, Jessica Cagle. There was a article in the paper about her that showed her throwing, and here's Jessica, state champion, throwing, with your chest out like this, and by God, the next day we went to practice, and here's Maggie doing it just like Jessica, and it kind of stuck with her for quite a while. But we like the release, the point of release, if the shoulders are level, maybe with a slight right lean. Again, keep the right foot moving through release. It never, ever stops. We always taught a fixed foot delivery. We still do. It's one of those things that I guess if it happens naturally, that's okay. But we think it's one of those things let the college coaches worry about. If your kid's good enough to go on to college and it works out, yeah, Ron.
I've some I've heard it's like female throwers tend to have more of a fixed foot, non-reverse, but men tend to have more of a reverse. Do you coach men and women differently?
Nope. We teach them. We're high school athletes, high school coaches. We teach everything identical. We don't teach anything different.
So no reverse for men?
No reverse for men, no reverse for women at the high school level. Which is better? I don't know. Very athlete specific. But this is what we did with Maggie. You see she's got her left foot down, so she's got a nice block working there. And the left arm is tight. So the left arm is long, and we finish, the left arm is tight, and the discus is delivered. And that's kind of there's what we were doing. That was the technique that we were working on through high school. And that's pretty much it. Now, no, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to move on. So now how are we doing on time, Eric?
You're good. Just keep rolling.
Oh, okay. So now what we're going to do is Maggie's going to take over. She's going to look at these same critical positions, and she's going to apply them to her 60-meter throws in college, and what changed, what what changed, what improved, what got better, just what changed. So this is the part you want to take notes on, not my part, all right?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really nice high school career discus-wise, and I think the absolute best thing that happened was my coaches, my dad, Hanson, everyone who kind of helped pitch in. I remember we did like a video call with Matt Wilkins.
Yeah,
we
sure.
worked with Ron, we worked with Lynn. Got a lot of different perspective from a lot of different people. And I think in high school, just the very best thing that happened with me is they just laid an incredibly solid foundation of the basics. So that when I went to college and now my coaches were like, all right, you have the foundation, now let's build this house, I was like, great. You know, I can do the basics like better than anybody. So, our critical positions in college were pretty much the same. I think there was slight differences. Like Dad said, in the entry we had a little bit of an up, down, up again. In college it went straight down into more of a check mark sort of pattern. We went down into the middle, a controlled fall. The single support was much more stressed in college. And then I'd say the power position, it may not look super different in the video, but I know I remember when I started working with Blue, I was like, oh, this is the same, but also quite different from how it's been coming out of high school. Yeah, things really weren't all that much different. So, this was, I think, from my senior. I threw 60-17. This is kind of a pretty good representation of my throw. I have thrown 62 meters. I consider myself a 60-meter thrower because that's more so where my average hung out. So I'm reversing now. And I'll kind of get to it at the end, but our reverse was almost more of just like a javelin throw, how you see them, they release the jab and they go flying over themselves and they face plant the ground, because it's a product of the energy that they've built up into the finish. It's not like that's really a part of the technique, it's just like they've hit a wall and now they're just like exploding over that wall because they've got so much energy. That's kind of how Blue treated our reverse. More of we did a lot of non, we did a lot of like static reverses, like a pause and a reverse. But again, I'll get to that at the end. But yeah, this is, again, just a good representation of a throw from my collegiate career. So, entry, you'll see, pretty much same concept. We stack everything over the left side. We don't fling open the right arm, the left arm. The left side of the body, once you get, I'm just gonna take off my shoes from the start so I can drill right now. So, we did it where, once you start to turn, everything kind of locks in out of the back of the ring. Once you start to turn, it's just the left foot that guides everything. I'm not thinking about turning my arm, I'm not thinking about turning my hip. I'm just locking in my whole left side. I'm shifting from 50-50 to probably like a 60-40 or like, probably just 60-40. Don't want to do too much more than that. But all I'm doing is turning my left hip, or my left heel, keeping my right hip where it is. Building up the stretch reflex just like you build up the stretch reflex on the finish. Building up the stretch reflex in my hips. So the second I go to swing, this right side is primed to have as much just efficient energy going as possible. Yeah. All right, and then sweep. Again, basically same concept as high school. we were taught, we called it a 3/4 line drill in college, and all that meant was take that energy, now you've picked up the right, it's swinging around, it's really snapping around on its own because you've built up that stretch. And now what you want to do is you want to send it down the right-hand sector line. You don't want to send it in the direction of the throw because you have so much rotational energy naturally that if you send it in the direction of the throw, you're going to now land, you know, way over here instead of right in the middle of the ring. It's going to pull you too far around. So you want to go up that right-hand sector line. No real separation at this point. I know one thing we didn't really touch on in the high school review, but one thing that I had an issue getting rid of coming out of high school into college is in high school, to get into the middle, we did a lot of hip dropping to get into the middle. So we kind of did that into the middle. Worked great in high school, but my college coach, he wanted me to stay stacked and wanted everything to go together. We don't have that hip drop. We don't have that sit into the middle. That's where that idea of sort of falling into the middle comes from, instead of sitting, dipping, dropping in that form in the middle. Any questions on that? All right, and so after we've driven up that 3/4 line drill, once you've kind of gotten to the end of like, okay, I've driven it as far as it's gonna go. I've driven it as far as it's gonna go on its own. I'm turning, but my knees are so far together, there's nothing left to do. That's now when we think, okay, now I want my hip in the direction of the throw, right? So we're gonna come off that left, We've gotten to the point where, okay, my knees are as close together, my legs, my adductors are as close together as they can get. Now we're switching to hip in the direction of the throw, instead of inside of the leg in the direction of the throw. This is the position where your separation is really going to start, because you're going to have a very, very active left foot because we've fallen off of it instead of jumping, skipping, hopping off of it. So now our left foot is free to the second our weight is ready to, it's kind of at that same time that you're switching into leading with the hip, you're picking up that left. You're getting up off that left as soon as possible, and you're keeping those knees tight together, and that energy is what is just going to snap you around into the power position. But it's really tricky because in this position, this is the time that you just have to do nothing for a second. A lot like how I talked about in shot put, there's a moment where you're in single support, without 2 feet on the ground, you can't do anything. You can't build energy, you can't push on the ball. So there's a moment while you're waiting that you just have to do nothing until it's time to put that left down again. You just have to do nothing again. Keep doing it like a shot put. But it's the same concept for discus. You just have to let the throw unfold. Don't rush to get it down because then you're going to get it down too early and you're going to throw out the right-hand sector line. And then obviously you don't want to get it down too late, but that's where it'll be a problem.
How long did it take you to develop that do-nothing mentality? You're still working on it.
Still working on it. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky concept, just like I was talking about in the shot put. When you're fired up, I mean, you're at conference, you're at state, you're at a world championship, the last thing you want to tell your body is, be patient, just hang out, just chill, do nothing. But it's such an important part of the throw. You can't rush the timing. The throw has to be rhythmic, it has to be smooth. It's a build of momentum. There should be no real part in the throw where you suddenly hit, you suddenly accelerate, you suddenly drive. It's all a smooth build, like when you spin a basketball on your finger. You just give it little extra taps. You're never like retrying to start it up again. same sort of concept.
Maggie, did you use a focal point with your eyes at this point of your career? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was, Blue Trick would often put like a cone or something pretty much right out the ring at 270, like we talked about. So if I'm throwing in this direction, 270 is right here. So like I would think like, look at Dad for just a split second. And that's usually all the time you really need to feel that patience. If you see something for just the briefest second, so much is happening with your body in that time that that's probably all like the patience you really needed. So yeah, I had a focal point of 270. Any other questions? Cool. Power position. This is where things got a little different for me. The power position that we had in high school was just, upon, thinking back on it, I did have a stint between Dad and Blue Trick where I worked with dumbbells, so, things may have changed with that too. But I remember thinking when Blue Trick came in, like, oh, this is wild. Like, I get why it works, but, so in the discus, the settle, when you're turning in that middle, when you're doing this, I'm doing it like a shot put. When you're doing that, it's much more this in discus. You settle down lower. You settle down into a wider base, and you're getting to a point where you're getting ready to put that left heel down. Because in the discus, I believe it was Coach Frontier who talked about it, in the discus, you want that left heel to come down because you really want to find that really, really heavy, solid block along the right side, or along the left side, that the right side can turn into. So, if I was doing it right, I would have a little more, my hand would be reaching a little more down, so the discus would be just a tiny bit higher. But other than that, I like that position. I may be also a little bit too shifted this way as opposed to really being on top of that right foot, so my hips, knees, everything's balanced. I'm pulling a little bit forward, but that's pretty much what we wanted. And then delivery. So another thing that was a little wild when Blue Trick came in is the delivery with Blue Trick was much less of a sling. We've always been taught just let it come around. Just let it come around. The discus knows what to do. Just let that stretch reflex happen. Blue Trick taught actively push on the discus. Actively push it where you want it to go. Push it out and around and push it through that finish. That was a concept, frankly, I never really grasped. It was something we were always working on, but, okay, yes. So, once you come to this power position, once you've come to this power position, you're going to draw this back. You're going to draw this back, try and build that stretch, stay back over this left, draw it back, and turn that right side. Turn that right heel, it's going to turn your knee, it's going to turn your hip. You're going to push, and that, once you get into this position, that's now when the slinging stops and the pushing starts. You want to push it out to 90. You want to push it, and you don't want to be shifting. Yeah.
Do you think that would, should we tell beginners, or is that seems dangerous?
No. Like I said, my technique, college, I think slinging it is great. Clearly, like I said, I never really did the pushy part. And I still was able to throw 60, but in an ideal world, that's like what Val Ullman is doing. That's what Olaga Tassawa is doing. That's what Christian Kett is doing. They're pushing. They're not just being passive and letting the stretch reflex happen through the finish. They're still acting on the disc. But, yeah, so you're here, you're pulled, you've turned this right side, you're pushing, and in a non, I would finish my throws like that. You bring the knees together, you slam the adductors together, and you just let that follow through happen. And that's really all there is. You don't really want to go up onto that left as far as I was taught. You want to stay back, and you want to push on it as long as hard as possible. Because then, I love this little pose, but then you slam those knees together, and you're going to have so much energy that naturally you're going to switch your feet. And that's, I mean, that's a task in and of itself. It's not just that easy, obviously. But the goal is you've brought everything around, and now wherever your left foot is where you want your right foot to replace. And in the discus, unlike shot put where our energies, we're wanting them kind of going up and over the top, because we're jumping as we're reversing, in the discus, we definitely want it directional. We want it going out when we're finishing our discus throw. And if you can, a slight, going this way now, right arm slightly lower. So if this is like a javelin orbit, so we're doing this. This is a shot put orbit, we're doing that. With a discus, we're doing this. We want it down because naturally with how a discus flies, it's gonna come out, it's gonna level up, and then it's gonna crash. When you throw it flat, it just wants to crash. So if you throw it out and you give it this angle, it's gonna come up, it's gonna flip to flat, and then it's gonna come down.
Maggie, how many fixed feet throws would you do in a session in disc?
Most of them. I really, really liked the non-reverse and discus. And because Blue taught the reverse as more of just a product of your energies slamming into each other, really we did primarily nons.
Right.
Every once in a while discus. But because I was doing the shot so much, obviously a lot of my shot technique when I would go to reverse the discus bled in, and so I ended up being way more vertical on my discus finish than Blue ever wanted me to be. Yeah.
Did Brian, in kind of a similar question, did Brian, as far as reverse, did he emphasize reverse for guys? They also throw a lot of non-reverse, the guys.
They also do a lot of non-reverse. So Blue, I will say, kind of to that point, coaching men and women different, I really can't speak to it on the high school level, but on the collegiate level, I consider like men's and women's shots two different events. A man should be coached different than a woman. You know what I mean? Same with discus, a man should be coached different than a woman. With the weight of a men's implement, their event is going to be much more about how powerful are you, because you really have to push. I mean, a 16-pound ball is ungodly. I don't even like to pick them up. I can't imagine that they throw them, and let alone they throw them 23 meters, you know? But our event, it's barely a 9-pound ball. You know, it's hardly anything. Our event is way more about being smooth, being fluid, being fast. How quickly, but accurately, can you deliver that shot? It's not so much about how powerful, how strong are you pushing on it. It's more so like, how quickly can you get that thing moving, and how accurately can you snap it off your hand in the direction of the throw. And the discus, I think, is no different. Yeah?
For like men's disc versus women's disc, I've noticed like women's disc seem to flip a lot more than men's discs, than high school boys disc. Is that like something that you should be aware of when like coaching, like because like you're saying that men's shot and women's shot are two different events, or is it?
I think at the high school level, it's not really something you can super control. I think the women's discs flip more just because they're lighter. The wind, the environment's going to act on them a lot more than the weight of a men's disc. So I'm not really sure how you should approach what we did in high school, I felt like I was just kind of perfecting the movements, perfecting the motions. But really, I kind of felt like I was going back to like what I had always known. So yeah, that's my college story. And if you'd like to take over with.
Any other questions about this? Just because we're gonna shift gears here, we got 5 minutes left. So, but if there's anything more you'd like to, ever since Maggie went to school, went off to college, oh yeah.
I have a question. Mental preparation, what did you do to mentally prepare?
For everything? Or anything?
Well, I mean, just like your bigger events in high school, and how did that change
Yeah.
when you went to college and professional?
Yes, so one of my very favorite stories from high school is when I first went to state, I believe it was 8th grade, in the discus. I was checking in my discus, and I ran into Miss Jessica Cagle, who was like the girl for women's discus in Minnesota. And I ran into her, and it was the first time we met. You know, fangirling. And I was like, "Are you excited?" Whatever. And she literally so nonchalantly was like, "It's another meet." You know, and I was just kind of like, "Oh, I mean, it's state. I think it's a pretty cool thing." But honestly, ever since that moment, not that you're taking away from the value of the meet or the experience, but we, from that point on, pretty much approached everything like that, where we were just like, "Meh, it's just another meet. It's just another opportunity to throw. It's just another chance to do what I love. It's just another chance to show what I'm capable of. And hopefully I can put my best foot forward today." And really that mentality hasn't changed much coming into college and then going into pros. Is really with every meet, I kind of just look at it as, it's just another chance to do my thing. You know, the more weight you put on something, the more stress you put into something, the bigger deal you make out of something, the more, you know, you as a coach feel it, the athlete feels it, but the more you can just let them know, like, "Hey, yes, this is the world championship, but you don't have to do anything more than you did at this little meet when you threw 1950. You don't have to do anything more just because it's this higher level meet. You're gonna do the exact same thing. It's just this meet has a new exciting title." So that's honestly, if that makes sense, that's kind of how I approached it in high school, and that's really still how I approach it today.
Keep it even.
Keep it even? Yeah.
Anything else? So I love, after Maggie went off to college, I love having discussions with her because there's no doubt at all that the teacher has become the pupil. She has gone so far and learned so much. I learn every time she comes home. She has something new, and I just sit back and listen. It's just amazing. And just on a side note, once she went off to college, I tried to do my best to step back out of the picture because I didn't want to send conflicting messages to her. "Oh, my dad says I should be doing this," and "Oh, coach," you know, because that can destroy an athlete. That kind of ends this whole discus part. I've got just like say a couple minutes of content. I've had the pleasure, of course, coaching Maggie. We've had a couple other another outstanding athlete come through, St. Francis and Amanda Anderson, who was a state champion in
16 and 17.
16 twice, and then went on to NDSU and had a fine collegiate career there where she threw 190 feet solid and some change and 53 shot.
Yeah.
And she is continuing to pursue her dream now, even though she's out of school. On another side note, she's now also the head throws coach at St. Francis. So it'll be her thing now to take off and do with what she wants. And we wish her the most luck there as possible. She's one of those gals. I had the pleasure of working with another gal. Her name was Maya Lesner. You might have recognized, she has a dad whose name you might have recognized. She went to Alexandria High School. She was a state champion in shot put, Minnesota state champion. She's at Colorado State now, and she just recently threw like 1850, which is just over 60 feet. She's the current national leader. And I worked with her kind of through that whole COVID mess, you know, so that was unfortunate for her. But anyway, so I thought, wouldn't it be neat if I just had a brief discussion with each of these ladies and said, if you had to do your high school over again, what would you want to do then, knowing what you know now? So just a couple of quick takeaways that might apply to your program somewhere. It was interesting, the answers I got from it, you know, after working with these gals. But anyway, Maya Lesner, Colorado State, wonderful gal, love her to death. We still talk regularly. But one of her things was she did not fully understand or appreciate the value of drilling in practice. For her, it was just something that she had to do in order to get to the ring and start to do full throws and see how far that ball would go. I want to grip it with it. She didn't really understand the value back then. Even though we talked about it back in the day, she didn't really, she said, throwing is 90% mental, whether you're a 90-foot thrower trying to be a 95-foot thrower, or a 190-foot thrower trying to become a 195-foot thrower, the process is the same. Once you get in that ring, and before, you know, nobody can have any impact at all on what you're doing. It's just you and the discus. And getting yourself mentally prepared to step in that ring and focused so you can perform at your best when you want to perform at your best was the concept that she didn't really, and she had tremendous performance anxiety.